I was 15 years old the night I stopped feeling safe in my own home. It was late September, the kind of night when the air feels heavy and quiet after the rain. My parents had gone out to dinner, leaving me alone for a few hours. I didn't mind. I liked having the house to myself. My best friend Chris came over to keep me company. We'd been friends since we were little, and whenever we hung out, it always ended with laughter or some dumb idea that made perfect sense at the time. That night, the idea was hide and seek. It started off like any other evening. We made popcorn, watched some TV, and talked about school. The house felt calm. The smell of my mom's candles filled the living room, and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound between our jokes. Looking back, that peace, that ordinary comfort, was what made what came next feel so wrong. Chris was the one who suggested we make it interesting. "Let's turn off all the lights except the one in the kitchen," he said. It sounded harmless, even funny. So we did. The house instantly changed. Every corner that felt normal moments ago now looked unfamiliar. Shadows reached across the walls, stretching and moving as our eyes adjusted. We laughed it off. We agreed on a few simple rules. No going outside, no attic, and definitely no crawl space. The rest of the house was fair game. I was the first seeker. Chris disappeared into the darkness as I started counting out loud. 1, 2, 3. My voice echoed softly, bouncing off the walls. Somewhere in the middle of the count, I heard him running. Quick footsteps, then a door creaking, and then silence. I reached 50 and opened my eyes. Ready or not, here I come. At first, it was fun. The living room was empty. The bathroom door was open. No sound, no movement. The quiet grew heavier the longer I searched. Every few steps, a floorboard would creak behind me, but when I turned around, nothing was there. I told myself it was just the house settling, but the silence between those creaks felt too long, too focused. The kitchen light barely reached the hallway, leaving the rest of the house swallowed in a dull gray. My voice felt small when I called out, "Chris, you hiding upstairs?" Nothing. The sound of my own breathing started to sound strange, louder, uneven. It felt like the house itself was listening. Then I noticed it. The basement door. It was slightly open, though I was sure we hadn't gone near it all night. The thin line of darkness behind it looked deeper than it should have been, like it led somewhere else entirely. I walked closer. The air near that door was colder. Not a little colder, noticeably colder. I hesitated, hand resting on the wooden frame. "Chris," I called out, trying to sound calm. From the darkness below came a faint, shaky whisper, "Down here." It was soft, but it was there. A mix of relief and unease ran through me. I laughed nervously, thinking he was trying to scare me. "All right, man, good hiding spot," I said, gripping the railing as I stepped onto the first stair. Before I could move further, the basement door creaked and began to close on its own. I froze, halfway between the hall and the stairs, watching it slowly shut. No draft, no movement, just that steady hinge sound until the latch clicked into place. I backed away. My heart was beating hard, but curiosity got the better of me. I turned the knob and opened the door again. This time, there was no whisper, just the low hum of the house and something else, the faint rhythm of breathing coming from below. I stepped down slowly, one creaking step at a time. The light from the hallway barely reached the bottom. The smell of dust and cold concrete hit me as my feet touched the basement floor. "Chris," I whispered again. No answer. Then I saw a movement. A shape crouched near the far wall, shoulders rising and falling like someone catching their breath. I felt a rush of relief. "Got you," I said quietly, walking closer. But as I got near, I realized something was wrong. Chris wasn't hiding. He was facing the corner, motionless, his back to me. I called his name again, louder this time. No response. Then he turned his head slightly, and I saw his eyes. Wide, terrified, fixed on something behind me. I didn't move. The basement was so still that I could hear my own heartbeat. Then, from somewhere just over my shoulder, a whisper, the same one from earlier, said softly, "You already found him." The sound was so close, I could feel the air move past my ear. I spun around, flashlight trembling in my hand, but there was no one there. Just shadows stretching along the walls and the quiet hum of the furnace in the corner. When I turned back toward Chris, he was gone. I ran upstairs, calling his name. The living room light flickered as I reached the hallway, and then I heard footsteps behind me, fast ones. Chris burst out of the bathroom, pale and shaking. "Dude, what happened?" he asked out of breath. I tried to explain, but I couldn't find the words. We didn't go back down there that night. When my parents came home, my dad noticed the basement door slightly open again. I told him what happened, but he just stared at the floor for a few seconds before saying, "That door shouldn't be unlocked." He didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he went downstairs and came back up with a new padlock in his hand. He installed it right then, tightening the screws like he'd been planning to do it for a long time. For years, we never spoke about that night. Chris and I eventually stopped hanging out. The house is still there. My parents moved out, but every time I drive by, I can still picture that basement door. Still closed, still locked, and I've never once been tempted to open it again. When I think back to the summer of 2002, I remember the smell of fresh-cut grass, the distant sound of sprinklers, and the way the streetlights glowed just before night settled in. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knew each other by name, where kids could still play outside until the porch lights came on. That summer, there were 6 of us who did everything together. We rode bikes, built forts, and almost every evening before dinner, we played hide and seek. There was one girl in our group named Ellie. She was the youngest, always full of energy and always smiling. She lived 2 houses down from me in a blue house with white shutters. Ellie had this laugh you could hear from across the street, the kind that made you laugh too, even if you didn't know what was funny. I still remember the last night we all played together. The sun had just started to set, painting the sky in orange and purple streaks. The air was warm, and the world felt small and safe. None of us had any reason to be afraid. Not yet. It was Ellie's idea to play that night. She shouted, "Let's do one last round before it gets dark." We agreed, and she insisted on hiding first. She wanted to prove she could find a better spot than any of us. So we gathered at the big oak tree in front of my house, our usual base. I covered my eyes and began to count out loud while the others ran off laughing, their footsteps fading into the soft hum of cicadas. When I reached 50, I called out, "Ready or not, here I come." The street was quiet, except for the crickets and the sound of the wind brushing through the trees. It didn't take long to find the others, one behind the trash bins, another crouched under a parked truck, and the twins hiding behind Mrs. Gordon's garden shed. One by one, they came out, giggling and catching their breath. But Ellie didn't. At first, we thought she was just being clever. She'd always been good at finding the best hiding places. We checked the yards, the driveways, the bushes, even behind the fence where the woods began. Nothing. The laughter faded, and so did our confidence. The air grew still, and for the first time that evening, nobody spoke. When Ellie's mom called out from her porch, asking if anyone had seen her, I remember the way the mood changed instantly. We told her we'd been playing hide and seek, and that Ellie was hiding somewhere. She smiled at first, but when 10 more minutes passed, that smile disappeared. Flashlights came out. Parents joined in, shouting her name. Neighbors started walking through the yards, looking under decks and inside garages. Someone even went into the woods behind the houses with a lantern. Hours passed, but no one found her. Then one of the searchers came running back, holding something, Ellie's small yellow flashlight. It was found deep in the woods, half buried in the dirt, still turned on. The light was dim and flickering. I remember standing there, staring at it, feeling something heavy in my chest that I couldn't explain. The police came not long after. They searched the area for days, even brought in dogs, but there was nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no sound. Ellie had simply vanished. People whispered things, that someone must have taken her, that maybe she wandered off. But no one really knew. For weeks, her mom left the porch light on every night. We all did. It became a silent ritual in the neighborhood, a light for Ellie to find her way home. Time passed. The neighborhood changed. Kids grew up, families moved away. I moved to another state after high school and didn't come back for years. But one summer, I had to return for a family visit. Driving down that same street after so long felt strange, familiar, yet hollow. The houses looked smaller, the trees older, and the laughter that once filled the evenings was gone. The blue house where Ellie lived was abandoned now. The paint had faded, the windows boarded, the swing on the porch swaying lightly in the wind. I parked my car and sat there for a while, staring at it. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to it. Maybe because that night had never left me. After a few minutes, I got out and walked to the front steps. The air smelled like rain, and the ground was soft beneath my shoes. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a tired creak, like it had been waiting. Inside, the house was quiet. The furniture was gone, the wallpaper peeling, dust thick on every surface. Yet somehow, it didn't feel empty. I walked slowly through the living room, my footsteps echoing against the floorboards. And then I heard it, faint, coming from upstairs. A soft voice, counting. 47, 48, 49. I froze. The sound was familiar, almost gentle, like a child whispering to themselves during a game. But there was no one else in the house. My chest tightened as I looked toward the staircase. The counting stopped. I went upstairs, one slow step at a time. The hallway looked just as I remembered, narrow, with faded pictures still hanging crooked on the walls. The last door on the right was the closet in Ellie's old room. That was where she used to hide when we played inside on rainy days. I reached for the handle and paused. For a moment, I thought I heard someone breathing softly behind the door. I pushed it open. The small space inside was empty, except for a faint outline on the wall. I leaned closer and saw it clearly, a handprint. Small, like a child's, pressed into the dust. The edges were sharp, fresh. I stepped back, my heart pounding. That's when I heard it, a quiet giggle behind me, followed by a whisper so close it felt like it was right by my ear. "You're it." The door slammed shut. Everything went dark. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall, trying to find the handle. When I pulled it open again, the hallway lights were flickering, but the handprint was gone. Only the smell of old dust and rain remained. I left the house without looking back. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the faint sound of children laughing, soft, distant, and fading with each gust. When I reached my car, I turned once more toward the house. The porch light flickered on by itself, even though the place had no power. That night, I sat in my car for hours, staring at that light. It reminded me of the ones we all left on for Ellie, the light she never came home to. I don't know what I heard in that house, or what left that handprint, but I know this much. Some games never end, and some players never stop hiding. I grew up in a small, quiet house at the end of Maple Drive. My parents both worked night shifts at the hospital, so most evenings, it was just me, the sound of the clock ticking in the hallway, and the low hum of the refrigerator. I never liked being alone, but when you're a kid, you learn to make your own company. I'd talk to my dolls, read out loud to fill the silence, and sometimes I'd play hide and seek. Of course, you can't really play hide and seek by yourself, but I found a way. In the hallway, we had this tall mirror. It stretched from the floor almost to the ceiling, framed in dark wood. I used to pretend my reflection was another kid, someone who could play along. I'd smile at her, and she'd smile back. I'd wave, she'd wave. I know it sounds silly, but at that age, it felt real, like I wasn't completely alone. That mirror had been in our family for as long as I could remember. My mom said it belonged to her grandmother and that it should never be moved. I never questioned it. But one evening, something strange happened. I remember standing in front of it, making funny faces like I always did when I noticed something off. My reflection didn't move exactly when I did. There was a tiny delay, maybe a second or less, but I could feel it. I tilted my head to the right, and she tilted hers a moment later. I blinked, and she blinked slower. I rubbed my eyes and laughed it off, telling myself it was just the lighting or that I was tired. But after that night, I started paying closer attention, and that's when things began to change. It started small. I'd be playing, hiding behind the couch or under the dining table, pretending I was waiting to be found. When I peeked toward the mirror, my reflection would sometimes seem to point, just a slight tilt of the head or the way her eyes shifted upward, like she was suggesting where to go next. One night, I followed her gaze toward the ceiling and noticed the small wooden hatch that led to the attic. I don't know why, but I decided to climb up there. I dragged a chair under it, pulled down the string, and the ladder unfolded with a soft creak. I climbed slowly, one hand on the rail, the other holding a small flashlight. When I reached the top, I looked down through the gap. The mirror was still visible from where I stood, and my reflection was still there, looking up at me. Then, before I could react, the hatch began to close on its own. I didn't touch it. I just watched as it sealed shut, leaving me in the dark. That's when I heard it, a whisper right next to my ear. It was soft, almost gentle. Count to 50. At first, I thought maybe it was the wind or that I was imagining it. But then I felt the air shift beside me, like someone was there. My hands shook as I started to count, just to make it stop. 1, 2, 3. When I got to 10, I looked down through the thin crack of light that slipped in from below. I froze. My reflection, or whatever it was, had stepped out of the mirror. I could see her walking down the hallway. The way she moved didn't look like me. Her steps were slower, deliberate, almost like she was searching for something. When I reached 49, I stopped counting. My voice caught in my throat. Then I heard the whisper again, clearer this time. Don't move. It's looking for you now. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stay quiet. I could hear slow footsteps below me, moving closer to the attic ladder. Then came the sound of fingernails dragging across the wooden hatch, followed by a soft laugh. A laugh that sounded exactly like mine. I stayed frozen until the front door opened, and I heard my parents calling my name. When my dad pulled me down, I tried to explain what happened. I kept pointing at the mirror, crying, telling them that I'd been playing hide and seek, and that she wanted to play too. My mom just held me tight, whispering that it was all a dream. But as she carried me away, I looked back, and for a split second, I saw it. My reflection in the mirror, smiling, a moment too late. Years passed, and I eventually moved out. I try not to think about that night. But after my parents died, I had to go back to the house to clear out their things. The rooms felt smaller, emptier, like the air had stopped moving. And there it was, the mirror, standing in the same spot, only now covered by a dusty white sheet. For a while, I just stood there, staring at it. Part of me wanted to leave it alone, but curiosity, or maybe something else, made me reach out. I pulled the sheet down slowly. The mirror was cloudy, but I could still see my reflection. At first, everything looked normal. Then, as I took a step back, I saw it, my reflection smiling before I did. I felt my stomach twist. I tried to turn away, but I heard it again, faint and distant, a child's whisper that froze me in place. Your turn to count. People say hide and seek is just a game, harmless fun. But sometimes, you don't get to choose who's playing with you. Some reflections don't let go. Some games never end.